Hey there, Internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Frank Bazzani. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good. I'm excited to talk to you about some of the stuff we've been playing.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. Today we're going to be diving into Riders Republic, Forza Horizon 5, Guardians of the Galaxy, the game, and then Eternals, the movie, a little bit. Spoiler free, probably on all those things, since I'm the only one that's seen Eternals, and Frank's the only one that's played Guardians. Yeah. Before we dive into that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. So yeah, let's kick things off right off the top. Frank, Riders Republic. This is a Ubisoft game, right?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's a Ubisoft game. This is technically like the sequel to Steep in
Okay.
that
Yeah.
snowboarding game from
Yep.
a little while ago. And that was what I thought was funny because even when you go into the Ubisoft club where you can get like bonus stuff for your game, which I usually do, it's like, hey, have you played Steep? You get this as a bonus, and I was like, I no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So Riders Republic. That's the crazy sports one. The most recent thing, which is the only thing I can kind of like pull to mind for it, is I saw Blessing post like a video of him in a jetpack, I think, that like shot him up into the air, and then he kind of did like a gliding around the like. Somebody else was like, it's an Iron Man kind of thing. Um, so yeah, like extreme sports basically is the idea of this one, right? So yeah, what are your thoughts on Riders Republic?
It's pretty cool. It's pretty much exactly like you said. It's kind of like a bunch of different extreme sports kind of come together. It has that same setup that they do in like Forza Horizon, where it's like this is the tournament where all the extreme sports people, the most extreme, come together
Mm-hmm.
and try to prove yourself. And so there's like BMX racing, but then there's also like there's like trick competitions. And then it's the same thing for snowboarding and skiing. And then there's like downhill races, but also like trick competitions. And then after you play, you have to kind of like unlock things as you go, and it kind of considers them like different career paths. So you're kind of like leveling up the different things in different events, and then
Okay.
they're kind of like spread out all over the like the world map. And then eventually, pretty quickly, it's like after a couple hours, you'll unlock the wingsuit and that rocket suit, which are definitely like for me like a highlight of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But then that's kind of its own like career path where you can do races and stuff like that. But then every time you unlock something like that, that's like a new way that you can also traverse like this open world map, because like the it has that huge Ubisoft like open world where there's like snowy mountains at the top, and then it transforms into like foresty like woodland, and then that goes into like kind of like Grand Canyon sort of like areas where it's like very mountainous and like
Mm-hmm.
rocky. And you can just literally go from one end to the other, and it would probably take a really long time, but it's cool how you like could be like snowboarding, and then you can just open your little like it's like almost like a weapon wheel, but it's all your vehicles. So then you can just be like, now I'm on a bike, and then you could just be biking through, and you can just change whenever you want. But that's like, I think that's a lot of like the fun of the game, and like why like what they've tried to like build up is that it is that like Ubisoft open world that you can just kind of traverse and explore, but they kind of gave you all these like options to play with. And then I love that it's also kind of like MMO ish, where there's just a ton of other players just around, like
Mm-hmm.
whenever you're just in the open world. And especially if you go to like areas that are very populated, like one of their main hubs, that is kind of like had the home base that has like all the stuff you can upgrade and buy like the microtransactions and look at challenges and stuff like that. There's always like a ton of people just hanging out there and walking around, and there's like a weird little like kind of like drained pool. And when I was there, a bunch of people were on the BMX bikes like sitting around it, and one person was just in there doing tricks, and everybody was just kind of watching them. And I was like, that is also kind of like what I think of as like the best part of the game,
Mm-hmm.
is just like when you get these like weird open world kind of moments that are like MMO like, because I'm not an MMO guy, and I know you've been playing like Final Fantasy 14, but
Yeah.
like it's totally that cool thing of being like, oh man, we're all just doing our own thing, but you just totally just run into people, and you could squat up if you theoretically like wanted to, but
Yeah. There was
that was
a
definitely like a highlight.
Nice. There was a time a couple weeks ago where was just kind of playing through Final Fantasy 14, doing my own thing, and then I went back to like one of the main hub worlds, and I saw Cameron there, like in the world, and we hadn't like met up or anything, and we weren't playing together, but like I hopped over and I was like he might be away from his keyboard or something like that, so I just started like dancing in front of him or whatever, and then he started dancing back, and I was like, oh, that's a fun little neat moment that we had, but also like in that same hub world, it's like one of the three main ones from kind of the base game, so like it's always filled with people, and I love that like pretty much anytime I like go back there and like land there, somebody will have like you can like compose music if you play as a bard character, and somebody will have some kind of like music going that they've kind of made, and it'll either be like, a Final Fantasy theme, or it'll be some kind of like pop culture thing. Or one of my favorites was I landed at one point, and like I'm just hearing Megalovania from Undertale, and just being like, nice. Shout out to whoever went in and figured out how to compose that in whatever the game kind of provides for that. So yeah, like I have like a similar kind of vibe to that. Like, oh, people are like, somebody's in there doing tricks, and people are just kind of hanging out and watching. I've seen like somebody I know that plays Final Fantasy 14 posted at one point like there's a like in-universe band that will like get together, and they'll go around and play concerts at various venues and stuff.
That's
And
awesome.
it's just like, that's neat. And people will like go and they'll turn like all their actions on or whatever, and kind of make it look like fireworks are going off or something like that. And it's just like, that's a cool little thing to do. Um so yeah, I love that, like that kind of um like shared universe element that can lead to those kinds of environments. With Riders Republic, obviously one of the things I think you and I have talked about in the past when we've talked about this game in the lead up to its launch was like, this might be a very frank kind of game given your love of Tony Hawk. Does it have kind of that? Does it have Tony Hawk vibes when you're like doing a specific thing, or is it much more just like open world? There isn't really like courses to it.
There is a lot of like the pre-designed courses and stuff that are be scattered throughout the world. And
Hmm.
so when you kind of open up your hub map, there's like missions, and you can be like, okay, I want to do that. And it'll be like a race through a specific course, or like the trick courses will have like stuff that's specifically set up that you can do. And then when you enter the challenge, there'll even be like sub challenges. You can get like stars for like, oh, score this much, do this trick. Some of the things have like photo ops. So if you hit a camera, it'll do like a different cinematic camera angle and kind of do a thing. So a lot of the levels have that. So it does kind of have that kind of like Tony Hawk-ish vibe, but and especially in the presentation they give you of like the characters and just the vibe they're going for. They definitely like want to go for that kind of thing, like an SSX, like Tony Hawk, definitely sort of vibe.
Hmm.
And I don't know if they always like nail it, because they're like the like the beginning of the game is super like dialogue heavy, and just them trying to do the thing where it's like, oh, you got to be the most extreme person on the mountain, and like it's all that kind of thing. It's a little bit like heavy handed.
Hmm.
And but then when you actually, once it kind of like lets you out and you're able to go through the open world and then kind of like pick these missions, that's definitely when it starts to get a lot better. And the thing that I don't love about it is the actual sort of gameplay. Like, I love the fact that it's this open world and you can even just open it, pick a mission. It'll pretty much teleport you to like the nearest thing that it can. And you can just try to traverse however far you need to get, which is usually not that far.
Hmm.
And like I said, you can pick as you unlock different methods, you can like have different methods of traversal, like sort of through the world. Um, but when you're actually in the like competitions and stuff, it tries to thread that line between like it wants to be arcadey, but it dials up that like the difficulty of like the amount of buttons you need to be hitting to accomplish things
Hmm.
into more of like a sim direction. And I think they tried to like thread the needle there, and I just don't think it really nails it. Like, I feel like it would have been stronger if they just went all the way in one direction. And for me, I'd say just go all the way arcadey, because like if you're playing Tony Hawk or like SSX, you hit a button, you jump, you hit a button, you immediately snap onto the rail, like you hit a button, you do like a grab or something. Like, it's like pretty simple, but there is a lot of timing, and there's a lot of like there's a lot, it's easy to pick up, but it's hard to like master, you
Yeah.
know. But this is totally like, all right, cool, you want to do a front flip, hit X and then hit triangle and then like rotate and then make sure you land in time to like get the perfect landing. You can have it auto land for you, but I was like, I've played these games a ton. I'll do the manual landing because it's not that much different. But it's like, I wish it's like it tries to kind of thread the needle there and do both. But since it has a foot in both worlds, I was like, I really wish you just went full arcade and I was just hitting buttons with the right timing and doing crazy stuff, you know?
Yeah.
But I think they wanted that extra level of like technicality, especially for like the racing, because I feel like the racing is like most of the game, and then they kind of like also put in a lot of the trick stuff. Because I mean, obviously, like it is kind of built around both, but all the game is always like the most so much of the stuff you're doing early in the game is the racing, and then some of the best moments in the game were from the racing.
Yeah.
And then the racing has less of that technicality because like you do need to be controlling yourself really correctly, and you can do a thing where you can do kind of like your e-brake turn, and after pretty quickly I was like whipping down mountains and having a great time, and you know, like I really got it. So um that's just kind of like my take on it, is that like I wish that like I think they just kind of tried to do that thing where it's jack of all trades, like master of none, and I wish they had just kind of like picked a direction and went for it.
Yeah, like if it's predominantly like a racing kind of game, if you're going down the mountain, you're not really you're trying to be first, you're not trying to get like a high score or something like that, right? So
Yeah.
there isn't really a benefit to tricks or trying to do tricks. It's not like you're getting a boost if you like land a epic trick or something like that. So that makes sense. It very much sounds like some of the elements I'll talk about with Forza Horizon 5 when we get to it. And I think there's probably a lot of shared DNA, and like Riders Republic has probably seen a lot of like the things that Forza Horizon does really, really well in driving that. So what run me through the like the different modes of transportation that you have in Riders Republic?
Yeah, so in my time, I was able to unlock the BMX bike, which you can use. Then I also got a snowmobile, skis, a snowboard, the wingsuit, the rocket suit. I'm trying to think, and then there's also a couple like the jokey kind of unique vehicles like that also are kind of like separate. So like it's still like a bike, but it's like you can get like a hot dog cart that has like the serving thing on the front of it, and there's like a race for that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bike that has like jet boosters on the back, and then there's like a unique race you can do with that. But so I think that's everything I unlocked kind of in my playtime, and I think there's like a couple more things I didn't quite get to because they're like you still have to kind of play further in.
Yeah.
But that's like those are all the methods I kind of unlocked in my time.
So what were the standouts for you?
Yeah, so the rocket suit was like a standout for me. And like I know I've heard other people definitely talk about it, and I think they kind of have the same thing I love about it, where like it feels great when you're in the air, but the takeoff is like incredible because there's two takeoffs and you can jump forward, and like, if you're on the edge of a cliff, like that really works only for that kind of scenario. Like that if you're just standing somewhere and you jump forward, you'll just slam into the ground. Like it's like definitely a hard takeoff.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other takeoff is you just boost directly up into the air and do like a 360 spin, and you can just start go flying wherever you want. And that feels so good. And it's to go back to the MMO thing, like it feels great when there's all these other people around, and especially when you fast travel to a point, and because it all puts you on the same point and you're just kind of like clipping through each other, and you just like eject up like 30 feet into the air with your rocket pack and like fly away because everyone else is on bikes and doing whatever. And I don't know why everybody I ran across primarily was on the bikes and on the snowboards and stuff. Like they were playing the game like that way. And I was like, you have a rocket pack. Why are you not rocket packing everywhere? Like I was just like, because I would just like spawn in, take off, and I was wherever I needed to be immediately. And like, even if you just slam into the ground, like it just kind of like respawns you right there.
Mm-hmm.
So, there was a lot when I first got the rocket pack. There was a lot of crash landings because it was totally that thing of I knew how to fly, I didn't know how to land. I didn't know how the game wanted me to land. Like there was no landing training, there was no landing techniques. There's a parachute. If you hit the like circle or whatever, you pop a parachute and you can parachute in. And I was like, oh, so you don't just slam it to the ground at full speed.
Okay, yeah, it's not fully an Iron Man kind of thing, but it is that.
Yeah.
It is that like opening or the training montage of him like figuring out the suit the first time. It's him like slamming into a wall or something like that. Trial by error. Yeah, It makes sense. Well, I imagine you said you do have to unlock the rocket, the
Yes.
suit thing. So maybe when you were fast traveling into those points, those people on the bikes and the snowboards just hadn't unlocked that stuff yet. So they seeing you and being like, "Oh my god, how do I get that?" Or maybe they don't realize they're unlocks and like, "Oh god, I have to." I do I have to pay money to get that cool thing? Um, cool. Any other closing thoughts before we move on from Riders Republic?
Yeah, yeah. Because there's just a couple things real quick. Because like one of the things I think there's a lot to do in the game, but I feel like it's a little bit content light, and I know they can kind of fix that over time. And I'm sure this is going to be like a classic Ubisoft games as a service kind of ongoing thing. But like there's all these different events and event types, and so there is a lot of content there, but ultimately like you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again, and
Hmm.
that is obviously kind of like a sports game. But the other hook they want you to do is through like cosmetics, which is like mostly like in my time like paid. Like you're getting the currency to then try to buy what you want, but everything's like super expensive,
Yeah.
at least in the store. And then like in my entire playtime, I could have only afforded like one like small thing that like I wouldn't have even wanted, you know. And then the other thing you're getting is like new gear, like you get new bikes and new snowboards and new like stuff. So not only are you like as you progress through the main story beats, you'll get a new thing like the wingsuit. But through the small beats, like when you complete a race, you'll get like a new snowboard. But like I think that's also just not like the most engaging hook for me either, because it's like in my time, every time I got one, it was just better. So I ended like I get the later you get into the game, that'll become more of like a variable thing. But like early on, it was just, hey, do you want this thing is better? Yeah, equip that. And then I couldn't even get like attached to any boards because like there was a bike I had that I was like, this bike's really cool. It immediately gave me one that was better,
Yeah.
and it looks completely different. So I'm just like, okay, like it was just like a loop that like I was like, I don't think they quite nailed this because like not only do I not really care about the gear, I'm just kind of like equipping whatever's best and moving on with my life. You know, I can't even like make it cosmetically work with my stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do they have a way to like, was it transmogrify? Is I think that's the term where it's like, oh, you can like keep the one with the higher stats, but you can reskin it to look like the cool one that you liked, from 3 levels ago or something like that. Do they have that
Not that
element?
not that I noticed, and because
How
it
did
definitely didn't call that out and show that, and I didn't quite dig for it, but I don't think they have that.
Yeah, I mean, like I remember that they didn't have that with Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and everybody's like put that in, and so they like built that into the game and they made that work in the game. And I feel like it's not something I ever really cared about, but I thought they put that in with Valhalla as like a kind of a base thing of like, okay, like you want something to look cool, but you want it to have those stats. Cool, we'll let you to do that, and here's how to do that. And so it's like, why, like, people want that kind of flexibility and customization, like put that, especially in an MMO kind of experience, like the like I was when I was running some things with Cameron earlier in Final Fantasy 14. He's like, yeah, you can get this, and it's going to be way weaker than anything you currently have, but if you like the look of it, you can kind of like, you can use the glamour to make it like appear like that's your weapon kind of thing. And I was like, cool. I don't really dive into that too much myself. I'm just kind of like, whatever. I'm like, I'm in there. I'm barely looking at like my own character. So I'm just kind of, and especially like until I get to end game where it's like, okay, now I'm at a point where I can have like the highest level gear. I don't want to have to keep going through that and keep redesigning my outlook or whatever, my outfits. But it definitely seems like that's kind of a core aspect. But it also sounds like absolutely Ubisoft that they would kind of bungle that. When you mention the cosmetic stuff, that you've only gotten like a little bit of currency or whatever, is it the other Assassin's Creed thing where it's like, hey, here's like 500 Helix credits. That's all we're going to give you the entire game. If you want more, you have to buy it or whatever. Is it that kind of thing too?
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
totally here because there's like two different kinds of currency, and one of them I didn't get at all in my playtime, and so I don't know if that's only for like microtransaction kind of thing. And then the other currency that's like coins that you get, like I said, like I got enough to like buy like a super small thing. And because also it's that it has the Fall Guys sort of store
Mm-hmm.
that like there's only like 5 things and it sort of
Oh,
rotates out.
yeah.
So in my time, I was like, cool, I don't want any of this and I can only afford the gloves.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just like, all right, whatever. Like so I get that in a longer playtime, that's probably a better thing. But I was like, that was another one where I was like, I don't love this system, you
Yeah.
know?
How much time did you put into this one? This is one you were playing like during a free week, right? Or something?
Yeah. So they did like a free trial sort of week, the week leading up into their launch, where everybody who could download it could play for 4 hours. So I played for 4 hours, and I got like really far. I feel like in because the game is super like hand holding at the beginning, like I said, and then so that's like 90 minutes to 2 hours, and then after that, had like a bunch more time where I could kind of explore through the world and get a lot more done.
Cool. Um, yeah. Any other thoughts then?
Yeah, sorry, because my last thing I did want to say that I think the game is at its best. Not only did I mention those MMO aspects, but there is a sort of race that they have called the mass race, which is basically like one of those like server events where it pops every so often, and everybody who shows up can join the same gigantic race that has like 100 people.
Uh-huh.
The most I saw was like 60, but I think it can go past that. I don't know what the actual limit of that race is, but like that is like when the game gets weird like that, I think is when it's totally at its best. Like when it just tries to be a straightforward sort of like, even though it has the flavoring of like the Tony Hawk like punk kind of aesthetic, when it has that like when it's just a racing or a trick game, it's kind of boring. But when it gets super weird and you do this race with 60 people all bombing down the same hill, and in those races they also try to incorporate like multiple things, so you'll go from snowboarding into the bikes and then into the like the wingsuits or whatever else, like it's almost like a triathlon.
Yeah.
And like those races are super fun and super incredible, especially because like I recorded footage of my game, and like when I spawned on my way to it, it was like a commercial for Riders Republic where like I was like biking or snowboarding or whatever, and some dude came by in the wingsuit, somebody came by in the other way, like everybody was racing to the same place, but we were all like just different characters like trying to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And those races are just fun because they're crazy where everybody can like slam into each other. You could like push someone into a tree and totally screw up their whole race. Like, so it's like you could totally just like get hit out early on and just your race is screwed.
Mm-hmm.
Like it really is like you want to be out in front and try to stay away from everyone.
Yeah.
But like that's the wackiness is I think what makes it like really fun.
Yeah.
And there's a couple other race types where they get weird with it. Like I said, where like the hot dog kind of cart thing, and then also like there's one where you wear like a mascot giraffe suit, and then there's also one where like it has the jet bikes, and like that's when I think it's the just at its best when they just get really weird with it. And like I think it's at it like it gets a little bit old when they just kind of play it straight most of the time.
Mm-hmm. When it's not like when it's doing the SSX kind of thing, it's not doing anything that SSX didn't do, so it's kind of like, what's the point? It's not evolving on the idea or anything like that. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then there was one thing I just remembered when you there, because you did mention my love of Trials earlier. There are some random like in-world spots that are like other events that are like totally Trials based things where it's like you still have the same controls you have for everything else, but it'll be like, okay, take this BMX bike and go through this crazy course that's like where you're up like in like it's like a peg or like a 2x4 that's like up in the air, and you have to try to like get the bike across it, and it's timed. And like some of those where I only played with like one or two of those, especially because they did get like the one I nailed first try, and the other one was like really difficult, so they kind of do run the gamut. But like that's also kind of a fun thing that I'm glad they put in and does kind of help mix up the gameplay. But like that was another one where I'm like, yeah, more of like that kind of weird thing, because I definitely thought there would be more of that like energy. But it is definitely more of that like that steep 1.5 or like 2.0 kind of thing.
Yeah. Is it the kind of thing you're interested in going back to? You gonna pick up the full version of the game and spend some time with it, or you got your trial experience and you're probably pretty set with it?
I think that's kind of the thing is like I think I'm pretty much good for now unless they do some crazy updates or something in the future because like I think it is a pretty good and fun game. And but like I in my time I was like I got everything I thought I was going to get out of this kind of out of this because were part of why I was worried about like jumping in the first place is just because I was like I don't think this is one I would play a ton. I think this is definitely one you play for like a little bit, a couple hours or like a weekend or whatever. But I'm glad they did the trial so I could kind of get in and check it out. And I was like, I do think it's a good fun game. I just was like, yeah, I think there's not much more for me here.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Well, then with that, I'm gonna segue over to Forza Horizon 5, which, again, as I kind of alluded to earlier, has I think a lot of similar vibes to Riders Republic, but all car based. So Forza Horizon 5, much like other games in the Forza Horizon series, is like you're plopped down into this incredibly gorgeous landscape. I'm admittedly playing it before it like formally releases because I bought the premium like add-on pack that got me early access so I could start playing it on Friday before it comes out I think on Tuesday. And it's Forza Horizon. This one's set in Mexico, of course. And it's a ton of fun, especially compared to the last one that was England, because England just wasn't as like diverse in terms of like its landscapes compared to the Mexico map that they've got. You've got like giant mountains, you've got like dusty desert dunes and stuff like that. You've got jungles, you got like farmland to kind of like race over. They've got a couple cities kind of scattered around the map. You have like rocky, craggy areas that make some like really good off-road stuff, and then kind of like everything in between, really. And so it's been a ton of fun, just kind of like spending the weekend like racing across that. One of the often like lauded elements of Horizon is like their kick-ass openings that are, you know, partially scripted, partially like just getting you into and introducing you to elements of the game. And this one has another one of those. You can see pretty much all of the intro. I basically recorded my first hour with the game. So you can kind of see that whole intro sequence that's in this one. It's basically like cargo planes flying over and dropping like the cars in Fast and Furious style. And you land and then you're going. And so it's like the first one is like, you land at the top of a volcano and you start like racing down. Another one is like you land in a dune buggy and you're racing across the dunes and stuff like that. And the one of the really cool elements of this Forza is that it doesn't like end there. The Forza Horizon story, like the little campaign mode that this one kind of introduces, is as you like when you start the game, you kind of have your like central hub where the Horizon Festival is taking place. But then you're kind of given as you like, you know, level up, you complete races, you get experience points and stuff, you level up and you can start kind of picking and choosing what other things you want to unlock. And there's like 6, I think, across the map. There's like 6 festival sites that you can kind of get. So you get your first one, and then once you level up and you can kind of continue the adventure, you can kind of pick, do you want to like open up and unlock another thing in that area, or do you want to unlock one of the other areas around the map? And each one kind of has their own corresponding like intro scripted thing. Like one I did today was it was like the second one of like the stunts map or something like that, and I think it was called like Beauty and the Beast basically or something like that. And it was going from the top of the volcano in a dune buggy and like racing down against monster trucks. And like it was me versus one monster truck, and I'm having to go through all the checkpoints and stuff. This guy's just flying all over, going wherever he wants to go, like crashing through things. And then somewhere near like maybe the halfway point of the race, like another one kind of barrels in. And so at the end, it ends up being like me versus 2 monster trucks. And it does. I mean, I imagine it's scripted because it worked way too well to not have been scripted. But it was because like, you know, you'll get ahead and then they'll just kind of like get a burst of speed or something and race ahead of you. But it came down to the end of the race. It was like me as like the little dune buggy in between the 2 monster trucks, and like I just kind of like race right past them at the last second to going into like the final kind of thing. Another one was like racing against a train kind of sequence, and they just do a great job that they just leave you feeling incredible when you've finished it, and they have like incredible like little cinematic kind of like photo finish endings kind of little elements. So that's like a thing that I think is a great kind of improvement upon the Horizon formula of like you get those elements in the races themselves, but having these kind of like fun pseudo scripted ones is just another like exciting flavor to it. Like once I finished the monster truck one, it then introduced me to one of the elements is you can kind of like you can kind of create. I compare them to GTA 5 online like online
The
mode kind
stunt
of things.
races.
Like
Yeah.
the stunt things basically. Like where it put me in a monster truck and I was in the giant like football stadium soccer stadium that they have on the map, and they had like bowling pins all around it. It was like, okay, go crash through 50 bowling pins and try and get up to X amount of speed and try and get like a combo bonus. It was almost the same kind of like Tony Hawk style of trial thing in there, but I'm doing it in a giant football arena, in a monster truck with like ramps that have been like built up over this place and giant bowling pins and stuff like that. And one of the elements of Forza Horizon that I haven't played around with too much yet is like you can kind of create those yourself. You can create your own like mini games and kind of like side levels, and in addition to the historical thing that you can always do of like creating your own races, you can now kind of create these own things. So I fully expect if it's not already in there that people have like taken that arena and started playing Rocket League with it.
Yeah.
Even in the base game, like if you drive into that arena, there's a giant oversized soccer ball that you can just kind of like plow into, and kind of kick it across, and you get like points, and it'll be like goal. So yeah, it has like all of the Forza charm, in that open world, that like all that stuff. It's been plagued with server issues this weekend, or at least for me it
Oof.
has been. So most of what I've been doing has been like in the My Horizon mode, instead of
Mhm.
like with other people. So I've just kind of got like my like I'll see the same like handful of friends I have in my friends list as drivatars scattered around the map or stuff. Um, but it's still been fun. I did get into a game. Oh, I forget what they call it. I think the Eliminator, I think is what they call it, which is their
Mhm.
battle royale kind of mode, or kind of like you described it, the a giant server race. Except it's much more battle royale in that you're in a your car is dropped in the map. There's a shield like that's closing in on you kind of over time, and instead of guns and shooting like Fortnite or whatever, it's you're going around the map. You're trying to basically stay out of the storm for all intents and purposes, um, and uh, and like other cars will drop into the map that you can kind of like pick up. And so like you'll start out with like a base level, a green car or whatever, but you might find a blue or purple car, or even possibly like a yellow legendary, scattered around. So like in the one that I did, it was like I want to say like 38 players or something like that. um, I got in, starting in my little Volkswagen Beetle, having no idea really what I'm supposed to be doing in this thing. Is just like, okay, stay out of the storm. Okay, cool. I will try and stay out of the storm. And then I see like clouds of and basically drones just dropping in like new cars, and you kind of have to like wait there and grab it and claim it, and then it just kind of switches you into the new car. And so I got like a level 7 or 8 kind of like purple level car that was basically a dune buggy, so it was great for just trying to get around whatever terrain I was dealing with. And then as everybody starts kind of getting like clutter like closer and closer together, you basically you'll be prompted, if you get close enough to somebody, you'll be prompted to challenge them, and then it turns into a race between the two of you to get to like an endpoint that's kind of set up on the map. And if you beat them, you get an option to like, it'll be like, okay, which of these two cars do you want, and they'll be eliminated as well. And so like not only are you taking somebody else out of the thing, but you're also getting a potential to swap up a car, which might be a better car. In one of my cases, it was like, neither of these is good for me, so I kind of want to keep what I have. But then in another one, when I took out somebody else, I was able to kind of like level up and get into another car. And then it got down to like the last like 8 of us or whatever, and I got into a challenge, and like the challenge I think it was probably going to screw us both over, because it was basically like the end point was like leading us over into the storm where it was closing. So like even if I'd won, the storm pretty much would have been like right on my ass, and I wouldn't have been able to get back in time. But I also lost that one because like when I challenged the guy, it just kind of like automatically drops a point somewhere on the map, and I challenged this guy and like almost immediately like went into like a brick wall or something like that that didn't
Oof.
destroy or whatever. So I basically started at 0 while he kind of had like a running start. And I was like, well, shit. So he ended up beating me to the end point on that one. But I was like, 8th place for my first time out and not really having any idea what to expect. It was fun. I don't know if I'll like spend a lot of time in that mode or anything like that, but it was a cool little diversion from the base stuff. Other than that, it's been a lot of going through, doing races. There's a millions of things to do on this map. It is a giant map. It's and as you unlock new areas of the festival, I've unlocked all 6 of the areas of the festival at this point, so I've kind of had each of those like little story level things. Like some of them, like one of them was like, hey, here's like Incan or Aztec like temples and architecture and stuff that they've shown off in the trailers and stuff too. And then there'll be like little stories that kind of like get peppered throughout. So it'd be like, hey, this story is gonna take you down this path of like you're gonna follow in the footsteps of like an ancient explorer, and you're just going around different areas, and at the end of each like route that you're kind of expected to go, it'll be like, hey, there's a statue that you need to take a picture of. And so it's kind of going through those things, and pretty much everything is like on a 3-star scale. So if you get there in X number of time, you get 3 stars. If you miss that, 2 stars, and then like slower is 1 star. The races obviously all kind of have star ratings, and yeah, there's just tons of shit to do, and it's a ton of fun so far. I'm having fun. Kind of, they do as Forza Horizon tends to do. They have like barn finds, so you'll get like a rumor on the map, and so it'd be like, okay, go to this area and try and find the barn, and you find it, and then they'll like you'll find like a really rundown, crappy car that over time gets restored and then gets added into your catalog and stuff. I've found almost all of those at this point.
Nice.
And then I've just been having fun kind of unlocking cars with the super wheel spins that they have, or using some of the currency to kind of grab a handful of cars. Like the first car that I bought this time around, same as the first car I bought in Forza Horizon 4, was a Pontiac Trans Am Firebird.
Hell yeah.
I tried to get the 1990 because that was my first car, and so it's that's why I'm getting this one, is because it's nostalgic. I think in this game, I think the last one was like I got an 89. I was like close enough. This one I think it was like an 87. I was like also close enough. Got it painted blue, like my old car, and then kind of drove that around. And then also, one of the things that I thought was a cool little thing in this one is like once you've found a barn, that becomes like a location you can drop off cars that will become gifts for like other players. Like,
oh, that's cool.
So you can basically kind of like pay it forward. And so like the second time I booted up the game or whatever, it was like, hey, somebody has like left a gift in your world, so go to this barn and pick it up. And it was at a barn I'd already been to, and it kind of introduced that idea to me. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I actually went ahead and like left my Pontiac Firebird in that car in that barn, and because you can then say like, who do you want to give this to, and you can choose like anybody or new players, or like you can basically kind of like somebody on my friends list or something. And so I was like, sure, I'll give this to a new player, and then and you can kind of leave like a little message. You can say like, you can leave it anonymously if you want, or you can leave your name or your like player your gamer tag. And so I was like, yeah, it's a cool little thing. Left my Pontiac Firebird out there for somebody else to find in the world. So so yeah, like just lots of cool elements. Still has all the same like Forza Horizon stuff of like you're pretty much anything you're doing is leveling up something. um, so like I got an accolade recently for like smashing my I think 100th cactus or something like that as I just drive through and plow through the world. Um, and yeah, it's just a ton of fun, having a great time with it. It's such a like a gorgeous game as is kind of has become like the par for the course for these things. And even as somebody who's not like a racing kind of guy, it's just like a a very cool, chill experience that like continues to like bring me back and keeps me wanting to go for more and stuff like that. It does do that thing. Like I've been playing on like novice, and at some point it'll be like, hey, you're beating all these guys pretty easily. Do you want to like bump up the difficulty to average? And I'm like, all right, I'll try that, because you get 15% more credits or something if you're playing through on average.
Yeah.
And I play through on average, and immediately I'm like down in fourth place. I'm like, nope, back to novice it is. I like winning races. I don't want to like so that's kind of my comfort level, because one of the things I'm just still really bad at is drifting in these games,
Yeah.
which makes certain elements of it like incredibly tough, because like there are things scattered on the map that are like very drifting specific, and I'm like, oh, I'm getting like a pittance of the, like, I'm lucky if I get the 1-star rating on those. A lot of times I just fail outright, and it's like, nope, you didn't do well enough. And I'm like, all right, fine, whatever. But yeah, it is a ton of fun in Forza Horizon. They announced like in the lead up to the game that like the DeLorean's going to be there at launch, and I imagine that means the DeLorean is going to be there like next week when it's out there available to everybody, as like a thing in the like kind of the weekly rotation, because that's the other thing. Like everything I'm doing is playing in the spring season, and I haven't even gotten to the seasons of it, because seasons in Forza Horizon kind of go on a weekly basis. So it'd be like, now I'm playing in spring, next week it'll be summer, then the fall, and then the winter in a few weeks.
That's cool.
And the the map will change accordingly. Like I don't think I played enough of Forza Horizon 4 to really experience that. So like when I went back recently, it was in the winter, and like lakes had frozen over and stuff, and I'm like skating across ice that otherwise, or that previously for me had been like just very like shallow water or something like that. And it completely drastically like it was really screwing with me, especially on some of the mountains things, because I was like, I don't have snow tires on this car, and I am just flying off the mountain every time. So I look forward to like staying with this one and kind of hopping in and seeing kind of how this beautiful landscape changes as the seasons change in it. But yeah, it's been a ton of fun. Trying to think if there's any other like highlights that I wanted to specifically call out, but so far, I mean, well, like I've not dabbled with this too much, but I want to give them a shout out for the accessibility stuff, because like a lot of the other a lot of games we're seeing nowadays, like on the start screen, it's like press one button to start the game or press one button to go into the accessibility menu. Like right out the gate, it was like the first thing that was introduced. And I don't think it's in there yet, but they've announced that they're patching in like ASL interpreters for the cutscenes.
Nice.
And I'm just like, that's amazing. Like that they're going to that level of trying to make this game accessible to people. And so yeah, just shout out to the abundance of accessibility options that are in there for people, because it's a really cool game, and I hope a lot of people get to enjoy it and experience it for all it is. Like personally, for me, from an accessibility like light level, like I love that it has like kind of guides on the track that are like, hey, like here's the optimal path to get through this thing, and they'll be like, hey, if you're going to hit this turn like going as fast as you are, it's going to be real tough to do, so it's red. And so like it basically is encouraging you to slow down so you get it into the blue zone before you get up to it. And I love that in Forza Horizon 4. I love it in this as well, just to help keep me sane, because otherwise I would probably lose even more races. So I love that that's a feature that you can kind of toggle, and you can kind of like, even that you can customize like how in depth you want that to be, in completely separate from like difficulty of drivers. Like I could set the game to like the hardest drivers like possible, and still have that thing on for me at, you know, the highest level. There's also like just kind of like auto, like some things will be like, hey, we're gonna auto kind of steer or auto brake or stuff. I mean, like obviously I also play on automatic. I'm never driving manual because I never really got into stick. So like that's all even that's to a degree an accessibility thing that I love, that I can kind of like keep in there, because otherwise I'd be failing miserably in some of these things. But yeah, lots of cool stuff in there. A race type that I do want to give a shout out to that I don't think was in the last one. They do have drag racing in here.
Hell yeah.
And so I definitely feel like there have been a couple times where I feel like I'm, you know, doing the Fast and Furious kind of like, all right, we're all on the starting line, and boom. I don't think any of my cars, I've not encountered a car at least that has NOS. And I don't know if I don't remember if they have NOS in any of the, or if you can like add a boost to any of the cars or anything. That said, I'm still getting over 200 miles an hour in some of these cars, so whatever. I don't care. I don't need the NOS. But yeah, lots of fun stuff there.
I always love when a game has that, or even just in normal racing if they have NOS, because if they don't have like a drag racing mode, because I could not tell you how many times in my life I have outboosted someone and then said the Dominic Toretto line where I'm like, too early, kid, or whatever, you know what he says, where I'm just like, and then I win, and I'm like, it works every time, and I love it.
Yeah. Also going back to like customization, obviously you get to customize your avatar. Another, I think cool. I could easily though see a conversation around like how, like, is this accessibility or not? But like even in your character setup, like you choose kind of your face, you choose your hairstyle and stuff, and then you can choose whether you have prosthetic limbs, like you choose arms or legs as prosthetics. And I was like, oh, that's a neat like thing. And then like there's customization like out the wazoo that you like as you kind of complete challenges in the game, or and this one does have accolades, which I think is new to the series. It's similar to a series that they had for the Lego DLC of Forza Horizon 4, where it's basically like, you know, smash 100 cactuses and you get a bonus in some form or other, whether that's like the credits, or whether that's a car, or whether it's a cosmetic, or whether it's a horn, a new horn sound, a custom horn, or like the emotes, or you know, you could even have like text and stuff that can pop up as kind of like fast quick text if you're you know, chatting with other players in the game or something. So there's like a ton of kind of customization at that level. Right now I'm rocking a green crown that I got, as they have like face masks because we live in the COVID times. So I'm running around in a space or a face mask and a space suit, I think. I don't remember. I think the space suit is like, because I paid for that premium thing, I think it was one of the extra perks I got, or it was something I unlocked in one of those like the kind of the story mode thing. Because like the story mode things, a lot of them there'll be like a, you know, a race. The monster truck one went into a, you know, a kind of a stunt thing that I did, but one of them was like, okay, now you're in this area, go find these 4 things, and then, you know, you can kind of proceed or whatever. And so like one of them was like, I'm driving around this like abandoned airfield with like rundown planes all over the place or something. And it was like, okay, go find like the you know, the flight jacket and the flight recorder and stuff like that. And so it's just cool little like, you know, little mini objectives to do in these, you know, these grander missions. And yeah, just a lot of fun, having a great time with Forza Horizon 4. It's been a fun little diversion, especially for the weekend here, and I look forward to kind of continuing to see where it goes.
Yeah, all that sounds great. Like it sounds like a really fun time, and it also sounds like they've really thought of like a lot of unique ways to use kind of the toys in the sandbox they kind of have, like even making like a battle royale and like making some of these other like fun game types. Like I didn't know some of those things were there, so I'm even more excited to check it out now. Like this is definitely on my list of like games to play and to check out. And so like now I'm even like more excited.
Yeah, the battle royale was in Forza Horizon 4 as well.
Oh, okay. I
That got
totally missed that.
yeah. Well, I think it got added probably after launch or something like that. But it's been in there, and when I booted that one up a few weeks ago, it's in there, the eliminator. And so yeah, it's just kind of continuing that on. One of the things, because the servers have been wonky, that I haven't really gotten to explore is the I think in this one it's called, I think, Forzathon Arcade, whereas in the past it was like Forzathon Live or whatever, where it's like in-game, in-world events that are like, hey, everybody go to this point and do a thing. Here's a drifting challenge, or go plow through a lot of things. Like one of the things I saw that they kind of showed off in one of the early trailers was like, pinatas are going to pop up all over the map, and you're going to like want to plow through pinatas and get points and stuff. Because the servers have been wonky, the couple that I've gotten into, it's pretty much just been me. Because it's either I'm in a public server, but like nobody else is able to get into it or something like that, or it's still doing the thing, but it's doing the thing only in my game. And it'd be, easier if I had like a party and a crew of like friends in my own game to like, we could all be doing it. But yeah, like one of them was like, get as many drift bonuses as you can in this thing. I'm like, oh fuck. But I still got like I think 100 drift bonuses in the 10-minute time span that I had, but it was probably looking for like 150 or 200. And that was just like the round one thing. Typically the way those work is like you're all trying to go towards that like one goal. And if everybody, if everybody achieves round one, then you go off to a different part of the map, and round two starts. And it's usually like, okay, now you got to get even more or something like that. So I haven't been able to get past round one in any of these yet. Hopefully once the servers kind of are stabilized or something, I'll be able to get in there and see a little bit more of that. But that's a cool element. And then there's in addition to like the story mode, there's weekly challenges and stuff that are coming up that are the like Forzathon list. And so it's like, it'll be like, hey, okay, one of the challenges I had was go take a picture of this mural with a modern supercar or something like that, or a modern sports car or something. So you basically get one of those cars either from your personal inventory, or you go buy one and add it to your garage, and then you could try and go find that mural, and then go hop into photo mode, take a picture, and it'll be like, okay, yep, you did both those things. Or the first time I did it, I wasn't in the right car type, and so it's like, all right, well, you took a picture of the mural, but you didn't take a picture of the supercar or whatever. So, oops. But you get like 10 Forzathon points for that or whatever, and as you're probably like 2 points or whatever, and like each week I think has like a total of like 36 or something. And if you get to like the halfway point, or like if you get to like 16 points, you get a car. If you get to like 26, you get another car or something. And basically there's bonuses for doing all this, or it'll be like, okay, go do this drifting challenge with this kind of car or something like that. Unfortunately, it'll be like one of them that I got was like, okay, get 9 stars drifting with this car. And I'm like, well, shit. But it was able, I was like, shit, I'm not going to get 3 stars on 3 of these, but it counted me getting 1 star on the same one like 9 times and gave me the points. And I was like, cool, great. I can move on to the next like element of that chapter and stuff. So it's a little forgiving in some elements. But yeah, it's in the same way that, like a live service game is going to have your daily challenges and your weekly challenges. Forza has those as well. And you're collecting points that you can use in the Forzathon shop. Theoretically, again, server issues. Anytime I try and click the Forzathon shop, it's like, sorry, can't be loaded. Try again later. I'm like, okay, maybe that's because I'm playing it pre-release technically, but I feel like there are enough other people playing it pre-release that it should probably be populated, and it's most likely just that like they're having server issues and stuff. But server issues aside, ton of fun, having a great time with it. Any questions on anything I've gone over, or anything I haven't gone over even?
Well, one quick thing I was wondering, one complaint or sort of complaint that I had heard some people throw around was like the fast travel, because you have to like smash some billboards or something, and then you're able to like fast travel to those points. But I heard that like some of them can be like difficult or like annoying to get to, and that's just kind of like an extra kind of frustration point. Like, how do you what's your take on that?
Yeah, so fast travel there are 2 types of billboards kind of around the map. One type is like here's bonus experience points, and it'll be it. Those tend to be like 1,000, 3,000, or 5,000, depending on like the difficulty of getting to that. So like, yeah, some of the ones that like, oh, this one's on top of a house, so I have to find out some kind of way to ramp up onto that thing to get the 5,000. Those are a little annoying. The fast and then so there's the experience points, and then the other billboards are the fast travel billboards. I've not experienced them as fast travel points themselves. My understanding of them so far is if I smash through one of those, it reduces the cost to fast travel. So at
Okay.
any point in time, I can fast travel to either the houses that I've like purchased around the map, and basically each part of the Horizon Festival that you unlock, there's like a corresponding house typically that you can go find, and the houses you buy basically like little houses to switch in your garage or whatever, change your customization stuff, and they'll usually have like a couple associated perks. There is one house I've not bought yet where the perk is fast travel anywhere. So I think if I get that one, then each of those fast travel billboards I've destroyed will also turn into a fast travel point. But right
Mhm.
now, I can only fast travel to either the Horizon Festival spots, so the 6 of those that are scattered around the map, or my houses, I think. So right now, it's a matter of like when I started, it cost 8,000 credits to fast travel or something like that. And with the amount of billboards I've smashed, I think it's down to like 6,800 now or something like that. Something like that. So it's the more of those fast travel billboards I'm smashing, the cheaper it's getting. And yeah, some of them are out of reach, and that's kind of annoying. And it becomes okay, how do I figure out how to do that? But I'm also swimming in like $2.5 million worth of credits or something like that. So fast traveling around the map isn't really putting a dent in my wallet or anything. So it's not.
But that's
I,
the same credits you use to buy cars,
it's
right?
yeah, it's the
Or
same credits you use to buy cars or cosmetics that you can buy. So yeah, it's I mean like if you're really expecting to be fast traveling a lot, then sure. But I mean, I think part of it is also like I enjoy driving in the game, so there'll be plenty
yeah.
of times where I'm like, oh yeah, the race I want to get to is 11 miles away. I could fast travel there for 6,800 credits, or I can take the 5 minutes to drive there and just kind of like enjoy and smash things around and be leveling up my car as I'm doing it and all that stuff. So it's it I I could certainly understand the frustration behind that, but for me, it's not really getting in the way of it. Um, if I were trying to be a completionist or whatever, and be like, all right, how do I get all of those billboards? Then yeah, maybe I'll start getting frustrated. Of okay, how the hell am I supposed to smash that one? There was one in Forza Horizon 4, specifically in the Fortune Island DLC. It wasn't a billboard actually. It was part of the like the treasure like quest of that one, but it was basically like on an island in the middle of a lake, and you couldn't like you had to jump from across like from the other side of the lake. You had to be going in like a super specific, super lightweight, fast car, hit a jump at the right thing, and land on that island. So I did that to get the treasure thing, but there was also like a 5,000 point billboard over there at the end of a dock or something that I could also get while I was on that island. And so it was like, okay, I only got that because I went online and figured out how the hell do I get to this, and people had kind of created like a here's a how to get to that island wiki. So I imagine there'll be the same kind of thing of like, hey, here are the hard to get billboards if I really want to do that. I don't feel like I probably need to. But if I put another 100 hours into this game or something and get to that point where I'm like, okay, there are only a few things I need left to do. Let me go find those few billboards that I haven't smashed yet. Then I'll try and spend some extra time figuring that stuff out. But for now, it's not bothering me. And yeah, I don't until I can, because like I think the house that has like the fast travel anywhere perk is I think like a $5 million house, and so I'm just kind of like waiting until I've accrued enough currency to get that. But yeah, like another one of the houses is like, hey, you get a free wheel spin every day, because you get wheel spins as like rewards for finishing first in certain maps or just leveling up and stuff like that. And the wheel spin is basically like a lottery, and there's like a regular wheel spin and a like super wheel spin, I think. And it's basically like a slot machine. Okay, I got a regular wheel spin. I'm gonna get like one random item, and that's gonna be a cosmetic. It's gonna be another car. It's gonna be money. It's gonna be like the credits, or miscellaneous other things. Or super wheel spin is basically like a 3-slot wheel. So yeah, like I'm getting a lot of credits through those things. So yeah, like I've already bought most of the houses on the map, also because I paid for like the premium expansion or whatever. Like 1 or 2 of them I got for free because they're like included as that, so like I didn't have to spend $1.5 million for one of the houses that I got. So it kind of gave me a little bit of a leg up, but a lot of it is just like there's it is the opposite of a Ubisoft game. There is no shortage of being able to get this currency, and I think even beyond that, there isn't like the only other like microtransaction-y thing that you can get is like treasure hunt things. So like you could get a map that would like show you where all of these things are on the map instead of like waiting until you've discovered it or something, and then the icon appears on the map. But even that, I'm like, I don't need to. If I wanted to, yeah, I could pay the extra, $3 for that treasure map or whatever. But I'm like, part of the fun is the exploration and is finding all these things scattered around the world. So, yeah, it's not a problem for me. But I can understand how some of those things being like really hard to get or hard to find are troublesome. But yeah, I don't think they're tied to, or like they are not restricting fast travel for me.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely good to hear.
Yeah.
Because that was really like I've only heard a couple other people's thoughts on the games, but I mostly just heard positive things. But that was just kind of one of those random things I heard kind of thrown around as well. But it also definitely sounds like very from what my better reference point would be like Need for Speed, where there's like warehouses around the map that you unlock that you can just kind of fast travel between. But that's kind of exactly what those houses are. And the fact that it gives you other perks sounds like it's even better.
Yeah.
Like this definitely to me sounds like it's like they're Need for Speed, but they're just doing it way better than Need for Speed is doing Need for Speed.
Mm-hmm.
And like I used to be into Forza. Like I used to play Forza Motorsport 2, which is before Horizon even existed. This is the sim Forza. And then I kind of, when I was like, I just don't love how it plays. And when they came out with Horizon, I was like, this is it. Like, you give me an arcade game with like this level of love and detail for the cars and the environment and stuff. Cause that's like, I think that's something Forza's had that's like unparalleled from like anyone else, is that like their car detail is like just out of this world, where they like have all these different cars, but they're all technically perfect in the way they're designed. And then when they even added the interiors, like, and so that's when I'm like, I fell off quick in the Horizon series, so I didn't play like 3 and 4, but that's why I'm excited to come back with 5 now that it's like it's even better than it was. You know, I was impressed with Forza Horizon 1 and 2, and now I'm like they're like remarkably, better at this point. Probably like the best arcade racer series out there.
Yeah. You touch on that. I one of the things I haven't really done a ton of is like going into the garage and like upgrading the cars themselves to try and get like better specs or whatever. And like I'm basically just taking whatever the base model that they give me is. One of the things I love about this version that I definitely don't remember being in Forza Horizon 4 is they have like an auto upgrade option. If you don't want to get under the hood and do everything, you can just kind of click the auto upgrade and it will basically say, okay, here's how much it's going to cost and here's the best version of this car we can give you. And I'm like, cool, yes, please. So I've done that a couple times rather than going in and figuring out, okay, what do I want to do with the front tires and the tire diameters and what do I want to do with the engine and the spoiler and the like all these other parts that I'm like, I'm just trying to find whichever number gives me the highest overall rating in certain cases. So like the fact that they gave me here's an auto upgrade option. Great. And there's as with games in the past, there's already like a ton of people out there like creating custom designs of the different models of the cars. So like there was one I think I got like a Ford or something that was basically had like a big old Doom decal on it. And that's another thing, like this is all in on the Xbox. So like some of the like obviously it's been a staple for a little while, but like you can get a Warthog version of a Jeep in there, but you can also get like the Warthog car. You can get Microsoft Teams like ring tones. I saw Brian Altano post like you can get the like shutting down windows, doom 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 doom, like, and you can turn that into your horn. Pretty sure like Skype is probably on there. I did see a Banjo-Kazooie horn.
Oh, nice.
Like I saw it like racing through in one of the like the wheel spin kind of things. So like that's clearly in there. And so yeah, there's it seems that they're like fully having fun with the Microsoft and all the IP and all the franchises within the Microsoft ecosystem in there. So yeah, lots of fun, lots of like self-referential stuff and stuff out there to continue looking for.
I love that, and I also do love the way you mentioned the ability where you can just kind of like buy all the best upgrades, and it just kind of tells you, because like I love that like RPGs have added that in like modern RPGs.
Yeah,
and I think it just made me laugh when you were explaining, because I'm like, man, it's so funny that you're like the RPG guy, and so then you go in and you mid-max all that stuff, and then I just want that option, and then for the cars, I'm that guy that goes in and I'm tweaking all the rims and spoilers and doing whatever. But I also like, especially, I just appreciate having that option of like, hey, what's the best combination of stuff you can possibly get? Because sometimes some games go way too deep with it. And even like some Need for Speeds can get too deep where I'm just like, man, I just want to race. Like what is the better option? I don't want to sit here with all this, like, because like a Need for Speed Heat I checked out recently. And for me, that goes a little bit too deep, because it's not even just like, what is the best gear? It's like, okay, here's a better like manifold or whatever, but then there's like 7 different types of manifolds, and then like those all have different specs, and it's like, do you want to drift? Do you want to like you want to be better at top speed, or do you want better? And I'm like, bro, I just want to race. Like I just want to race my car.
Yep. That is me to a T. So yeah, having a ton of fun with that, and looking forward to, like, I think I'm probably already up over like 100 cars in my garage. I think they have, I think they were touting this one has like 540 something, 500 some, over 500 definitely.
That's wild.
So yeah, and like a lot of them I got because I got the car packs for that I paid for or whatever. But even just unlocking stuff, I'm unlocking things left and right and stuff, and having a ton of fun with it. So yeah, and then it'll be like, oh, use this kind of car for this challenge or whatever. I'm like, all right, I don't have that one. Okay, let me go to the auto show and just buy it from the library, and so yeah, I can, when I buy the car, I can either, like, by default it says, okay, here's a whole bunch of skins you can download for this car, and you can like use these custom designs that other players have kind of created, and a lot of times I'm just like, I just want something simple, so I just like go in and just use the colors option instead of going nuts with the crazy decals. But there have been, like, it'll be like, oh, I'm buying an old-timey car or something like that, and I'll go and get like an old-timey Coca-Cola logo on it or something like that, and I'll be racing around in a Coca-Cola Formula F something from like the 30s or something.
That's awesome.
Just being like a silly thing. So yeah, lots of fun in there, and I'll be very curious to see what they do in terms of like the expansions this time around. Because obviously the thing that really got me into Forza was the Lego expansion last time, and I think in Forza Horizon 3 they had like a Hot Wheels expansion, as kind of like they seem to do like a fun one and a jokey one. I even have from I still have in like my Xbox library, Forza Horizon 2 had like a Fast and Furious tie-in expansion that was like a standalone thing, and I have that somewhere in my library if I really wanted to go back and do that. But yeah, I'm curious what they will end up doing with kind of the expansions here in the Mexico map. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
With the yep. I know we're gonna move on, but with like the skin creator thing for the cars, I'm always terrible at those. Like, even since I was a kid, I've never been able to be any good at those. But now that we have the online component, the first thing I do is I just go look for, if it was a car from the Fast and the Furious, I just go look for Fast and the Furious skins, because somebody has done it and uploaded it. So like for the one Need for Speed I was playing, Payback, last year, I had an RX-7, and I was like, cool, somebody did the red RX-7 with the Dom exact decals from that's the one he has in the very first Fast and the Furious. I got Brian's Skyline with like the blue stripe on it from Too Fast, and I'm like, and it's always like one of the top ones because everyone is downloading it, and I felt so like people are like, I'm not alone on this.
I feel seen. Yeah. It's crazy, especially like, again, given that like part of it I feel like is probably because this is using a lot of the same cars from Forza Horizon 4, just like looking better. There's probably a lot of those decals that are just like, it's the same car from like the last one, so they just kind of have kept those in there. But I was very, very surprised by like how many decals are already in this game and how many like custom looks are already in this game for the assortment of cars that I was finding. So yeah, lots of cool stuff out there. And again, the aesthetics of the Mexico landscape, gorgeous in and of themselves, but there's also this like fun element of growing up here in the desert. Like, so much of what I'm driving through looks like if I hopped on a dune buggy and just drove 20 miles outside of town. And so that's a ton of fun from that as well. And I think they do a good job. I mean, I certainly am not the one to speak on the representation of it, but I think it is like a good celebratory representation from what I'm seeing versus like exploitative or anything like that. So I hope people enjoy, because yeah, it's a good fun time, having a great time with it. So yeah, let us move on to your other game of the week, Guardians of the Galaxy from Square Enix. Arguably what a lot of people are saying is like the biggest surprise of 2021. Are you kind of one that falls in that camp?
Yeah, 100%. That was definitely going to be the first thing I was always think of with this game, is that it's like, this is the surprise of the year for sure. Cause like, it looked all right in the in like the trailers and like that extended gameplay demo we sort of watched and talked about earlier in the year. But after the Avengers game, which I was like, I haven't played it admittedly, but it just, even looking at it, I'm like, oh, this is not for me. And I wish they did something. I wish they had did what they did for Guardians of the Galaxy here, but for the Avengers. Mm-hmm. They really knocked it out of the park with this game, and that doesn't mean that it's perfect. By all means, there's definitely problems with it. I had like legit bugs and issues with it when I was playing. I also think the combat's a little bit like half baked, and I think there's definitely could have been some improvements there, but everything else about it is great. Like, I love the fact that it is just like a single player linear game. Like, I know that sounds weird to call out, but like we don't like get a ton of those anymore. So I appreciate that it's like, hey, it's not open world even. It's just like, hey, you're going through the chapters and we're telling you a story. But because we're doing it this way, they have the complete Telltale system of picking dialogue and making choices throughout the game. And it is definitely the diamond analogy of everybody starts here, goes out here, and then comes back together at the end. But you can totally flavor and kind of change things. And there's one whole mission that completely changes depending on choices you make. And then there's also like little things and just even how people will like react and treat you. It is definitely the Telltale thing, even where like sometimes in the corner, it's like somebody will remember that, or like you did this or whatever, so like this means something's going to happen later. And like I was able to get somebody on my side, and then at like the big climactic battle, they showed up and they actually wiped out like an entire room of enemies that I was about to have to fight. And I was like, so I guess if you fail, you just have to fight a giant room full of people, which would have been like a hard encounter, but they just wiped out the whole encounter for me. So I was like, a small thing that I did like hours and hours and hours ago actually did come back and like mean something at the end of the game. But then besides that, I think it actually tells like a pretty good story. And I think the biggest part of that is like, it nails the actual Guardians of the Galaxies and each character that they have. And they really do a lot of like heartfelt moments with the characters and them getting to know each other. And I'm jumping around a bit, but one of the things I appreciated about it is that like it isn't like a origin story of like, oh, we have to get we're assembling all the Guardians, like who are all these people? It's like introducing it. It's literally like, yeah, they are the Guardians of the Galaxy. They've been doing this for a little while. This is just an adventure that is like happening with them.
Yeah.
And So like I appreciate that we just kind of jump in and then you do get to just learn more about them and have different conversations with them. And you, of course, like some of the things you say and kind of the decisions you make even kind of impact some of those relationships. It doesn't go like it goes deep in the story of terms of like like I felt like it was surprisingly emotional and I did like all the characters, even though I'm already kind of bought into them from like the MCU, you know, so there's already a little bit of like a leg up there. But then like all the decisions you make for a lot of the characters doesn't like impact. It's not like Persona with like a social link or like with like a Telltale. There's like and there's not like romances and stuff like it is limited somewhat. Like there's not like you can't like permanently like I usually was pretty nice to everybody, but I feel like even if I was mean and a dick about stuff, I don't think it would like I just think they would be more of a dick to me, you know, where like in my story I was trying to be like a nice leader and like pull everybody together. So then that's kind of the story I feel like I got is where you're like us pulling this ragtag group of people who really hate each other. Well, they not like hate each other, but they just bicker all the time.
Yeah.
But that's what I feel like the game kind of nails is it nails not only like the heartful moments, it nails just like people bickering with each other. Like some of my favorite moments are in between certain chapters. You're just on the Bolano. And so it basically just goes like Mass Effect, where you can just walk around and interact with stuff and you can just talk to people and have extended conversations. And there's also, there's collectibles in the game and there's some of the collectibles are like Guardian specific. And if you get that collectible, that unlocks additional conversations with that Guardian that are in it's not just like a hey I'm going to sit here and kind of give you all the exposition about who I am, but it is just kind of like that, like it's like these extra backstory dialogue scenes. And so like you can one of the ones with the first one with Gamora, when you talk about her, she talks about like Thanos and she talks about like flipping on him and joining the rebellion, and that's just additional stuff that doesn't really like, you know, it's just kind of like background and lore like that you can like learn, and it kind of helps build those relationships. But like I thought that was super cool that like that's not just the only collectibles in the game, that's just what some of the collectibles happen to do.
Nice.
Like I thought that was like a really cool kind of like addition that they could throw in there.
Very cool. So yeah, what one of the things I've heard kind of people talking about is the story and the characters are like incredibly well done, like the writing slash the performances and stuff. How does that stack up versus, because this is like one of the things that that the Avengers suffered from was like everybody being like these aren't the MCU Avengers that we know, but at the same like on the flip side of that, everybody was like, this is a really great Kamala Khan introduction for people that didn't know that character. It was a really cool way of because that was like, you know, for a wider community, that was like their first introduction to that character. So I'm curious how Guardians kind of straddles that line of from what I've seen of the trailers, this goes way more into the cosmic nonsense than even the two movies we've gotten so far. But we do have the MCU versions of those characters to kind of compare these ones to. So how like, does that cause like a disconnect? Does that, or do they largely kind of try and craft a little bit of their own path, or are they maybe too slavish to trying to be the James Gunn Guardians?
I think it like combines the two fairly well, and I thought it gelled pretty well because it is 100% like this is the comic Guardians, and they definitely like steer into that a lot because there's things that are just completely different from like if you were using the like if you only knew the MCU and like that canon, there's just things even in people's backstories and just conversations that happen that are completely different. But that is it's because it's pulling so much more heavily from like the comic basis, and then there's all this other, like you said, this cosmic stuff that they get into and places they go that I didn't even really expect. But it's like, yeah, they're pulling just so much from the comics. But then in the characterization of all the characters, I feel like there's a lot of the MCU there, and part of that is because I think that that's one of my biggest touchstones for the Guardians, and I know part of that is like, well, those movies really nailed what that kind of group of the Guardians could be like, so then that's just kind of what they're like, and then even what they're sort of like in the comics, and then now that's just what the modern iteration is like. This team, these characteristics, and like the guy that does the Drax voice, he does a good job, but he is doing like the Batista Drax. Like it sounds like identical. And then the guy that does Rocket, I think kind of does the same thing where he sounds, he's not doing like a Bradley Cooper impression, but he sounds like Rocket, and that sounds a lot like Bradley Cooper's Rocket, like, but that's just kind of what Rocket sounds like. So like, I think there's like weird things you get into there where I'm like, they there's totally those comparisons you can make, and I can even hear some of them, but I feel like it's tried to do a good job of like taking, okay, well, these are the aspects people know and expect, like the music and some of these characteristics and some of these jokes, and then this is all the comics lore, and we're going to try to like slam these together and kind of carve our own little universe here. Because to your point there where you kind of ask about that, like I do feel like this is its own, kind of how Insomniac has like their Spider-Man. I feel like this could be like, they're like, hey, this is our little world, this is our kind of like our pocket of like, this is our iteration of what these characters are. And so that's what, like, I think they do it pretty well. Although I do think they kind of flounder somewhere where like, because I think the soundtrack is 100% MCU inspired, but it's not as good as the MCU soundtrack. Like, and this music, because there's licensed music, there's a bunch of 80s hits.
Yeah.
But like, there's certain moments in the game where like a specific song will play that I think they've like hard coded into like, okay, this moment this song will play, and they try to make it like cinematic, and that works. But then there's all these other moments where like just random, because it'll just pick a random song.
Yeah.
So then it's a thing where I'm in the middle of a battle trying to be hyped, and like Never Gonna Give You Up is playing. And I get that like, okay, that's like, we're being jokey, we're being fun, but I'm like, well, this could have like, they could have, I feel like they don't like gel the music as well as like the James Gunn's Guardians does, and I feel like the only reason that music is like so heavily here is because of the MCU.
Yeah, I was definitely gonna touch on that, because I've heard a similar thing, and when I heard that, like, when I heard it from previews, I think people were like, oh yeah, I went in and did this sequence, and I hyped everybody up, and then like such and such a song came on, and somebody else was like, oh really, when I did that, this song came on. I was like, oh, okay, I don't know if I'm gonna like that element of it, of like, oh, it's just a random playlist that you get. Because I think that element works best when it's working in those scripted moments, and obviously all of the Marvel or the MCU moments are scripted moments, and James Gunn is notoriously very specific in the songs he's picking for thematic reasons and all that stuff. And so, yeah, it's like, I think that can very easily cause like a disconnect where they're going for a joke. And especially because correct me if I'm wrong, but like it basically triggers in the mechanic when like you get the whole team together for like a huddle, and then like you go back to combat afterwards. That's when the music's coming on. And so
exactly,
depending on how many times you're doing that throughout the game, that's going to become very repetitive, and it's going to lose a little bit of that magic each time, especially if there's like a disconnect between the action in the moment and the song, beyond the song just being like 80s pop song.
Yeah, no, I think that's a definitely one of the problems I have with the game, is because like, not only in the sense that like the music was definitely disconnected sometimes, but that's like one of the only times you hear the music is because like there isn't music the rest of the time. It's just when you do the huddles. And I didn't like the huddles like at all, because it totally just like stops combat for like 10 to 15 seconds, because you hit it, you get this animation of like Peter pulling up the Walkman, and then like it kind of panning down him, and then the camera spins behind him, the Guardians run up, they say their different lines, and then you have to pick like the correct response. There's two responses, and one of them's correct and one of them's not. And if you say the correct one, everybody gets a buff, and then everybody gets their abilities recharged. And like that part's pretty helpful. But like it takes like 15 seconds at least, and like it literally just grinds everything to a halt. And I had one of them where it was broken. Like the Guardians ran up and they didn't say their lines. Like the VO didn't play.
It glitched.
Yeah, so then I'm Peter, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what they said, and I'm supposed to use what they said as the clue for what I'm supposed to say, and it's usually so dead on as like a word they said appears in the box of what I'm supposed to say. And so that's also another side thing I have, is I think the writing in these huddles is like significantly weaker than the writing in the rest of the game, which like, I'm sorry to whoever worked on that, but it felt that way. But especially because it's like a thing where somebody's like, I'm scared, and it's like, don't be scared, and it's just like so like basic. But then like and it's just never anything that I feel like would actually hype anyone up either, and it's always just so random. But that I like stopped using that for a while as like a mechanic, because I like the game didn't necessarily press me. Like the game's not difficult at all. It's not like even I even heard I was about to turn up the difficulty and I heard from somebody who was like, I played on the hardest difficulty. It still is just easy. Like the game never is like that difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like it sets up like these combat and these things that it wants you to do, but it's like it doesn't press you in a way that like you need to use them or try to use that. And there's times I totally activated it on accident, like towards the end of my run, or I was just activating it because like you have to hit L1 and then a person's thing to use their ability, and then R1 is shoots like one of your specific blasts, and then the huddle ability is L1 and R1. So there were just times where I was just accidentally hitting it because I was doing too many things at once.
Yeah.
But that's why like it's a cool idea. It just clearly wasn't implemented in like the way, or like in the best way, or the way I think they necessarily maybe even wanted it to. Because I would have just preferred if it was like you hit L1, R1, maybe you get a 1 second thing of like Peter pulling up the Walkman and it's that, and then everyone's just buffed. Like I wish they took out all the rest of that like mechanic completely.
Yeah. That does seem weird. Like it seems like they were trying to still kind of keep it with like that telltale like choose your own option kind of thing, but it's like it's an interesting idea the one time, but not the 30th time. Or even the 5th time. That sounds unfortunate. Is there, so obviously it's action kind of stuff. Is there like, are you leveling up your characters and getting new abilities as you go throughout the game?
So yeah, each guardian has 4 abilities that they can use that's like specific to them. Yeah, and as you play through like the beginning kind of level, you get everybody's kind of initial ability, and then the rest are bought, and you get those ability points just by leveling up, and you get the XP just from doing the combat arenas. And in my playthrough before I hit the end of the game, I was definitely able to level everybody up, and like and since it's not like an open world game, it's not like you can really miss anything. So I feel like they definitely did that on purpose, because there's also you can upgrade Peter's guns, and you have to find components in the world to do that. But there is so many components just in one playthrough. You have way more than enough. Like I had 2,000 extra components, and I was still able to get all of Peter's upgrades.
Got it.
And then now I'm on New Game Plus, so now I have 7,000 components, and it's just like it's useless because I can't do anything with it. But so like
they didn't do the Last of Us of like, hey, you're not going to be able to get all of this stuff in one playthrough.
Yeah, thank God. Which like because this game is kind of bad for completion, I think a little bit, because it's like it doesn't track everything the right way it should, and if you do the chapter select, it just reverts you to whatever you had in that chapter, and then if you leave, you don't keep any of that. So if you need collectibles, you got to do New Game Plus, which is why I'm in New Game Plus right now. Which like I'm not mad about, because I really like the game and want to keep playing it, but I have to acknowledge that that's just bad game design in 2021 when you want people to collect all the outfits for all the Guardians, but then I can't go do chapter select and just get the shit I need. And it's the same thing with a couple of the other like collectibles, and there's also some RNG trophies we talked about too, which I've been able to get most of so far, but like that's another shitty thing.
Yeah, it's like I'm amused by that almost, because like from having just played Life is Strange Before the Storm, another Square Enix published game, like the Life is Strange games are great for those collectibles of like, okay, you finished everything, you can hop into this chapter and specifically this scene of this chapter to find the collectible that you need, and it's not going to change any of your answers or whatever. It's just like you're just going to go in there and you're going to do that, and it will even tell you like, here's where you've got 1 of 3. So there are 2 more that you need to find in there. So it's always fascinating in the same way, kind of going back to your Riders Republic stuff of like, Ubisoft just learn from your other suite of games. Square Enix, just learn from your other suite of games, like what people are actually like honing in on and doing. Don't like doing these things, like having these, completely random trophies being frustrating. That's annoying. For those that, since we talked about that before we started recording, there are some trophies in this game that like are completely random whether or not they're going to pop or not, because it's like, oh, you need to get such and such a character to use such and such an attack on this enemy type that's maybe only in one spot of the game or something like that, and it's going to be tough to actually get that to trigger, and that's just an unfortunate thing in trophy design for nerds like us that really get into that kind of stuff.
No, 100%, because the chapter select, you can go back to chapters, but then the problem you run into is like you mentioned, is like you can't pick a specific point. It's just the beginning of that chapter. So that is already kind of annoying. And then what was there's but yeah, so then it's like if you need to fight an enemy that's like at some point at the end of a chapter for one chapter, you just have to play through that entire chapter and get to that point. And then if you don't get the RNG to get the trophy for the ability thing, just play through that
Do it
chapter
all over
again.
again.
Like,
Yep.
yeah, and I assume somebody was sitting there and going, well, we want them to play it multiple times because it's decision based. But then I'm just like, yeah, but like I wish you could have just done the chapter select thing. Another one that's kind of a thing too is because you can't skip scenes because you have to make decisions. So the only thing you could do is skip sentences,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't skip every sentence because some things I assume it's kind of like Miles Morales, where on my second playthrough I was skipping some of the non like important scenes, but some of the scenes you will have to watch because they consider them like vital.
Yeah.
And I think it does that where it's like, hey, these are vital dialogue and vital scenes, so you need to see this. But it's like that makes it harder because even on my New Game Plus, there's some stuff I was just skipping through. But it's like I have to just sit there hitting circle because I'm just like sentence, and like I'm just skipping one sentence at a time.
Yeah.
And then if it's an extended sequence of like action where no one's talking, you just can't skip because it's just there's no dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a game that I'm still very intrigued by. I've repeatedly, since it kind of got announced, saying that it looks like the most 7 out of 10 game of 2021. But given that so many people, yourself included, are kind of coming out here and being like, actually, it's really good. It's like it's surprising how really good it is. It's definitely like my sentiment has been, I'll get around to it if the buzz is good on it, and the buzz has been good on it. So it's definitely one that is on my list to check out by year's end. But I am probably still gonna see if like anybody throws it out there for a Black Friday sale or something like that. But between now and like mid-December, um, yeah. About how long is the game? It's like what was it, like 12, 14 chapters, something like that?
Yeah, it's about 15, 16 chapters. And it takes like about 15 hours, I think, if
Okay.
you're just trying to do one run through. And that's like me looking around a lot and just kind of exploring and stuff. If you just kind of like mainline it, you can get
Yeah.
through it a little bit faster. Because on my New Game Plus, I'm just running to the objective and just like, and like it's just a lot faster. And I'm skipping through random sentences.
Mhm.
But so like that I think, and then if you're going for the full completion, people are saying it's about 20. And you can do it in one playthrough, but that would be the kind of thing where like on your first playthrough you have to follow a collectible guide.
Yeah.
So I don't recommend playing that way, especially because there's some decisions you might have to make to get to a collectible. So it's like I wouldn't recommend doing that your first time, but it's a game I recommend people play. And like you said, like I thought like going into it, I thought maybe this would be like a 7. Yeah, if I was putting a rating on it, I would give this at least an 8, if not like an 8.5. Like it's a really good like Uncharted-esque Jedi Fallen Order like single player game. And I think Jedi Fallen Order is like a pretty apt comparison where like it doesn't have that same exact combat that does, where that's like a little bit more like a Souls game.
Hmm.
But this is, I think it's just like that took that what they did, like they understood Star Wars and they were able to take that and build a whole universe and a game around it. And I think this does that for Guardians and Marvel really, really well.
Hmm.
So that's why I think anybody who likes Guardians of the Galaxy and who likes Marvel would also really like this game. And I do recommend you check it out because I think you also would really like this. If you don't get to it this year, and this is for everyone too, I definitely understand. Like it's like I'm not even saying rush out and play it, but if you have a lull or some point or get it on sale and you just want to sit down with this game, like I definitely recommend it because it's really good. I even, to throw the Fallen Order thing out there again, and this is like I like Fallen Order a lot, but I would even like this more than like Fallen Order probably, just because I like the more like linear side of it, and I like Marvel a lot, so they kind of have me with like all these like obscure references that they're like throwing in all the time, and people just talk about like one-offs of like name dropping other characters from like that cosmic side of the galaxy.
Yeah. Real quick, you kind of touched on it, and then we didn't really dive deeper into it. But you mentioned kind of combat in general, little half baked. We talked a lot about the huddle kind of mechanic, but when you're not doing the huddle, what is the gameplay? You're obviously controlling Peter, so I imagine there's an element of it that is like you're shooting things and using abilities as Peter, but you're also controlling the Guardians or like directing the Guardians, because I imagine if you don't do anything, the Guardians are still doing stuff, right? So yeah, what's
Yeah,
that element look like?
yeah, so because that's pretty much it, where you're playing Peter, and it's like a third person action game. So and then you have your two blasters, and so you just are kind of running around, and he has his jet boots, so you're kind of dashing around a lot and doing kind of shooting enemies, and then you call on the Guardians to use some of their certain abilities that they have, and when you're not using them, they're just auto fighting random people, and doing like a pretty decent job. But then their abilities are way stronger and are like the strongest things you have available to in the game. Part of my problem is that not all abilities were created equal, because some abilities are just legit awful, and like I didn't use at all or used once and was like whatever. Like, and some abilities were great, and it's like since it's on an ability timer where you would like use somebody's ability and it has to refresh, it's like I'm always going to use the strongest best ability, and it's a thing of like somebody's ability that costs 3 ability points to buy, which is the most expensive. Well, sometimes it's their worst, and the one like Gamora's, the one they give you right out the gate, is the best.
Mm-hmm.
And then her ultimate ability is just a stronger version of that. So then like I was like, okay, cool, now I have like a two that I can like bounce between. But that's kind of the main gist of the combat. But I think it's just part of the problem is it comes in a couple ways, where I think some of the enemies are just too bullet spongy, because they try to like make some enemies that are tougher, and I think it ends up just being like you just firing shots into them a ton. And I've ended up using the Guardian's abilities a ton, where I just like would fire through all of them and then keep doing, they would refresh, and I'd keep doing that over and out. Like the abilities are what you want to be using all the time, even though like you can just kind of shoot your way through a lot. But the some of these tougher enemies are just super bullet spongy, especially with one of Peter's abilities is just to like rapid fire for like 5 seconds or something, or maybe more. And you can either shred through a room of people, or you could like focus on one person. And there's times I like focus on one guy, just shooting him a bunch, and he has like half health.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, man, like, and I get he's supposed to be like a tougher mini boss-esque thing. Like it's like, how there's like the grunts and then there's like the tougher enemies. It's like
Yeah.
he's supposed to be tougher, but I'm just like, Jesus, like even
It's the
throwing
big Titan
abilities
guys in Arkham.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then but sometimes they won't even be like that big. It'll just be somebody in like a suit, and it's like, oh, but he has an armor suit on, so he's clearly indestructible.
Mm-hmm.
And I it's definitely like that for sure. And that's where that's where it's just kind of this weird mix, where then the low level enemies are pushovers and they die really quickly, and some like especially early in the game, and then the high level enemies are just like really really really, they're not tough, they have a lot of health,
Yeah.
and that's what's like frustrating about it sometimes. But on the good side of it, I did like some of the Guardians abilities, and I liked being able to use them in tandem. Like Groot has like a crowd control abilities where I could wrap up multiple people in his like trees, or get like he could focus on one strong enemy. But since they're pinned down, then I can kind of get more damage off on them, or have somebody else use their ability. And that's why I constantly tried to just use some of them in tandem. And like Groot and Rocket's abilities work great together, because you could pin down a bunch of enemies, and Rocket's first ability is just to throw a grenade that does a ton of damage. So like there's totally times groups of enemies were coming in like a door, I stopped them all together and just blew them all up and they never even got in the room. And that's when I was like, that feels great. Like that's what was awesome about it. But then when you get to some of these like higher level fights that I think that they want to be more technical, it just ends up with me like using some Guardians abilities and then shooting a thing in the face way too much.
Mm-hmm.
And then just being like, man, I don't want it to be like Dynasty Warriors, but I wish they had went more in that direction, where they're like, we're going to give you a lot of weak enemies to just tear through, instead of like, hey, here's a couple weak enemies and then like 2 or 3 strong enemies that are like buffing them, or that have some other ability that's like tough to get around,
Yeah. All right. Any closing thoughts before we move on from Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah, I was really surprised by it, and I think it was a great game. The One of the other things I know, I feel like I ended up highlighting more things I had like problems with than and the things I liked about it, but I did really like it overall, and what they did with the story and the characters. The one thing that I think might get fixed in the future, but it is a little bit buggy right now. Like I legit did have problems that like there was nothing that like completely broke my game, but I even saved a couple clips of like there's times I died in like these Uncharted-esque like escape scenes, because the game just died, like it freaked out on me and didn't know what to do. Like there's one where we went from sliding to like landing into a thing, but then I landed in and then the game just ejected me out and I like fell through space. And I was like, okay. And like I had no control over that whatsoever, but I saved it as like a game clip. And then there's another one that I forget, something happened and I ended up dying again, like missing a jump or something because the game just didn't know what to do. And like because it's like you have sometimes it's like that Uncharted thing where like a bridge is collapsing, you're running and you have to like jump or whatever, and like I jumped and then it just didn't do what it was supposed to do. This somebody was supposed to catch me, and then that just didn't play out. It's like, okay, you lost. It fades to black, but then the cutscene's still going. Like I can hear the audio, and it put up the prompt of like the quick time event for me to do, but my controller was locked out because I was dead, so I couldn't do it. And I was just like there's just a bunch of random like legit bugs like that I have like that I think it also kind of drag it down a little bit. But those things are the things I think they could at least patch. Like some of the other gameplay stuff I think is just kind of hard coded in, but like that's some stuff I hope they also kind of fix in the future. But I do not to end on a sour note with it, but I do recommend people check it out. I thought it was a great game, and I think it's going to be towards the top of my game of the year. Like it's not going to be game of the year, but I think it's going to be probably in the top 5.
Cool. That's a glowing recommendation, certainly. Excellent. Well, then we will wrap up here. Probably not going to go too in depth on this, but I did watch The Eternals yesterday, maybe. Where is it? Friday night. I'm in a weird place now. I work now Tuesdays through Saturdays. So like my weekend is now Sunday and Monday, and I'm still getting used to that. But yeah, so I went and saw Eternals. I really enjoyed it. I think it speaks to my sensibilities though a little bit more than maybe your average like big blockbuster kind of thing. In it, like I liked it in the same way I liked Dune or I liked Blade Runner 2049. Like it is very deliberate in how it's paced and how it's telling this story, that if you want more like big action, set piece, it's not that. And in large part, it's because it's introducing so many new elements. I mean, let alone like 10 new characters like to the universe, but then giving 7,000 years worth of those characters' backstory over 2.5 hours, 2 hours 40 minutes, something like that. But I think it looks beautiful. I think everybody in the film shows up to play and is doing what they're doing. I, as like a mythology kind of nerd, love, and this is, I'm sure, innate to the character's own existence in the comics as well. But like when you have characters like that are named Icarus and Circe and Thena and Festus, I love that part of their history within like the human civilization is that they were the inspiration for those, like for Icarus, who flew too close to the sun, for Athena, goddess of war, for Hephaestus, master blacksmith kind of tinkerer. One of the characters is Gilgamesh, and they show very specifically like, here's the Eternals creating the myth of Gilgamesh and Enkidu, based off of like their own kind of character, and so I think they have like a lot of really cool ways to like insert these characters into like the global history. I think it's an incredibly beautiful, diverse cast of characters, in just how widespread it is. Kumail Nanjiani, unsurprisingly, steals the show in a lot of his, and a lot of the humor of the film surrounds his character, as well as kind of like another character in his little ecosystem. That's a ton of fun. The action, I think, is fine for what it is. It's problematic in that it's yet another kind of like case of, oh, these are like CG bad guys, and so it's our heroes fighting a bunch of CG stuff that clearly wasn't there on set, or was clearly a guy in a mocap suit or something like that. So like there's weird aspects of that's just kind of like innately Marvel Cinematic at this point. But when they step away from that and are talking about more of like the metaphysical aspect of these characters, or the things they grapple with, having, lived among humans for thousands of years, but having been ordered not to like intervene too directly with those humans, and kind of the toll that takes on them. The relationships that have formed between certain Eternals is a lot of fun, and that's where I took a lot of joy from the film on. But at the same time, I see a lot of the criticisms around the movie, and I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of those criticisms. They just weren't the things that I took away from the film. Um, it's ultimately much like Guardians of the Galaxy. It is introducing a wildly new aspect of the Marvel universe that I personally was not familiar with. And like I probably have not felt so like in the dark going into a Marvel movie. Well, I really didn't know a lot about Shang-Chi either. But like since Guardians of the Galaxy, of like, okay, here are these characters, here's the whole cosmic universe side of Marvel, and all of the potential that's out there. In here, you're dealing with the Eternals. There's a lot of Celestials lore. I mean, the this movie does start out with like a text scroll, basically, of like, here's the before the movie that you need to know about. Here's like a little backstory on Celestials and a little backstory on Eternals and Deviants, just like written out. Which I will say, like when that popped up, I was like, oh, this should be a show me, don't tell me kind of thing. But I think they do enough. Like it's basically a here's the Star Wars scroll, basically, to set the stage for the film you're about to see. It does. There were elements where I was like, oh, I wish I hadn't seen some of the trailers and stuff, because they play around with like time and flashbacks and stuff. So like, when you meet a character for the first time, it's like, okay, but I know based on the trailers that I've seen that these two characters have maybe had a conversation or something like that. And sure enough, like later on in the movie, it's like, oh, we went and did a flashback and I saw that thing that I already knew was in the movie because I'd seen it in the trailer, kind of thing. So like that kind of does its, a little bit of like spoiling bits of the movie, or spoiling like character motivations and stuff like that, or kind of like foreshadowing different elements of the movie. But all in all, it's a fun journey. And I very much appreciated going and seeing it. I don't know if I need to like clamor out and see it again. Um, like it's definitely not like a top tier, like, oh, I have to go see this immediately kind of other Marvel thing. But there are definitely things that I probably missed a first time around. And so it's definitely one of those things like I will watch this another time or two when it comes to Disney Plus, no problem. But I don't know if I'm going to be like, I don't know if this is going to be one of those that I go and see a second time in theaters or something just to kill an evening. It might just be I saw it, I enjoyed it, I had a good time with it. Lots of good performances in there. Um, they introduce a lot of cool ideas, and they definitely kind of tease some future things to come in the mid credits and post credits scenes, as they're wont to do. And I'm interested to see how those things play out. But I'm also like, in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, well, the thing they're teasing there, probably 5 years away at least, if at all. And so it's like, okay, we'll see, how some of those elements play out. But it definitely sets a new, and I will also be interested to see, I guess, how other elements of the MCU deal with this, because there are like global ramifications of what happens in this movie. um, and it's going to be curious to see if like anybody refers back to that, or if any of these characters start intermingling with like the non-eternal characters, or if this is going to be its own kind of little bubble of the universe. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how kind of the future of the MCU continues to play out in this post Infinity Saga world.
Yeah, I'm glad you definitely enjoyed it, and that kind of makes me want to go see it a little bit more. Because I mean, I'm a huge Marvel fan, as you know, and that's why like I kind of fell out of the, like, going to see it day 1 kinda thing, and then now I'm still like, "Okay, I gotta go see it super soon," but some of these, like Black Widow and this, I just don't feel that.
Hmm.
Like Shang-Chi, I was there, like, said the Friday it came out, and I was like, and it was a great movie, but this and Black Widow, I was just like, "I could wait," and then, like, even after I saw Black Widow, I wasn't like, "Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't like, 'Oh, I should have saw this sooner,'" you know, and that's the same thing with this. I know I'm probably gonna go see it pretty soon, probably while it's still in the theater because I'm probably not gonna wait for it to come to Disney Plus. But that's why, like, it just the trailers and everything and the vibe of it just didn't make me feel like I needed to run out and see it. And then what you're saying of like, yeah, and then it's not one you necessarily want to see like multiple times in the theaters.
Hmm.
I was like, I definitely I just get that vibe from this movie, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's a it's a tough lift for them in this series because, like, I mean, this is, I think, more than probably any other movie in the MCU, like a completely unique standalone thing. Like if they didn't mention Thanos and the snap and stuff, like this could have been its own entirely own thing. There's like, I mean, the lightest of spoilers, I guess, but like none of the other characters that we've met like really come into the picture. A couple get referenced, like somebody says like, are you magic like Doctor Strange or something, like are you a wizard? But like other than that, like nobody that I can remember, nobody that we know from like the existing stuff is like crossing over into this one. So it's having to kind of do that extra list of like just introducing a whole swath of new characters that like we've never met before, and so you kind of like how invested are you going to get into each of those? I mean, admittedly, I will freely admit, like I walked out of this and I still didn't know all 10 names of like the Eternals that are kind of like in the core group. There were a couple I was just like, I don't remember what their name was, just because there's so many. Like I was like, they were really cool and I really liked them on screen, and I loved like their dynamic with the other characters. I just didn't remember their name. I didn't catch their name, apart from knowing that it was probably something that was like, some kind of mythical, um, you know, prelude or something like that. Um, but yeah, it's definitely having to introduce a whole lot of exposition to just a completely different side of this that we didn't know. And it definitely kind of like, without diving into spoilers or anything, it hints at the idea that there will be ramifications on a cosmic scale to what happens in this film, but when those happen, who knows? And so yeah, there's like, it's hard then to say like, okay, like, I mean, even with Shang-Chi, it was like, okay, like you saw in the trailer like Wong and Abomination and stuff like that, and even those like light, and or we kind of know the Mandarin a little bit from the Ten Rings and stuff, and so there were like hints of previous MCU to kind of like bring us into Shang-Chi. And then Black Widow, obviously, like we knew that Black Widow just came out far in the wrong sequence of events. Like Black Widow would have done way better if it had come out around Civil War when it happens, kind of chronologically, compared to
100%.
after that character has already been kind of written out of the MCU. And so yeah, this is doing like a completely unique thing in the MCU of it is having to. It's not getting any of those shortcuts that other MCU movies maybe get to bank on a little bit. And so yeah, it's definitely a unique case in that regard. That I again, I understand. Like, I mean, I've seen the kind of the pre-review stuff was like, oh, is this the first rotten movie in the MCU? Because a lot of critics were walking away saying like it's just not doing anything adventurous, or it's not doing anything bold, and it is having to introduce a whole bunch of stuff, and everybody's showing up and doing their part, but we're 26 movies into this thing at this point. Like, just showing up isn't really enough anymore. Like, you got to kind of like, how is this series going to continue to kind of innovate on itself? And that's definitely something that I understand, that frustration and complaint. But for me, the like the questions and the thoughts that I started walking away with of like, how would I, like, if it was me in those situations, how would I have tried to, like, who would I have sided with in these kind of like cosmic debates that these characters are having, what would I have done? Is certainly a more interesting struggle that I had in this compared to some of the other ones I've walked out of. So I appreciated that. I appreciated the questions this made me ask versus some of the other stuff. So it worked for me, but it might not work for everybody else, and I get that. And definitely,
we got to get that Eternals game so you can go make all the choices.
There you go. Yeah, it also definitely, like, it feels its length. And for me, not in a bad way. It very much was like in a Dune kind of way. Like, I enjoyed the amount of time we got to sit with things, and some of the landscapes and stuff were beautiful and gorgeous and stuff like that, and really cool to see and experience. But it takes its time, and it doesn't try and rush through things, despite the fact that it has like a lot of information to pack in there. So yeah, overall I enjoyed it, but and I will be curious to like hear your thoughts or discuss the movie, I guess, with other people when the time comes. But yeah, it was Eternals. It was fun, and I very much am looking forward to Spider-Man No Way Home.
Oh yeah,
the fourth MCU movie we will get in 2022 or 2021 after the barren 2020 that we had last year. Plus we got Hawkeye here in a couple weeks as well. So the MCU will never die. It's just gonna it will outlast us all at this point. So yeah, it is eternal. Haha.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think unless you have any questions or anything else, I think that will wrap us up. So thank you, Frank, for joining me today to discuss all these things. Riders Republic, Guardians of the Galaxy, and then my little things of Forza and Eternals here. We can wrap things up here, making our plugs around our metaphorical table. You follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Frank?
Yeah, I'll just give a quick shout out to one of our other podcasts, That News You Care About. I earlier today I was actually listening to a couple of the episodes I was behind on. So the ones I wanted to shout out was the one you guys did about the current review score systems, and then the following episode I believe is also about some PAX South memories. So I went back and listened to both of those, and I was trying to this is when I was putting together the doc for dinosaurs, and then you were talking about the Zyger painting story, and I was like, I completely forgot that existed. I started laughing about us sitting here at my desk.
Yep. You're I still have because when I was looking at those PAX South memories, I basically like pulled my old Trevor Trove blog posts that I then copied over into That Nerdy Site when we launched that, and I still have like the link to your tweet. Almost none of the handles referenced in that tweet are still like active or correct or anything like that. But your tweet was still out there with Zyger seeing that painting and thinking it was a window. Yeah, it was definitely a show that would have been a good one to have you on, just because I knew like PAX was your first event. We touched on in that episode, the fact that like I booked the flights for you because you'd never been on a plane before, or you never booked a flight before. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, kind of going down that low memory lane, and just like more so than anything, like thinking about just how much things have changed in the last 5+ years since that PAX 2016. But yeah. Lots of fun there. So yeah, solid shout out for That News You Care About. You can follow me at Trevor J Starkey. The shout outs I will give are if you're interested in Forza Horizon, I did, in addition to our normal Tuesday Thursday Let's Plays that would go up every week on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. I did put up a bonus Let's Play of my first hour of Forza Horizon 5. Put that up on Saturday this week. Was it Saturday? No, it was Friday. It was Friday this week because I played it Thursday night and then like recorded that hour and uploaded it for Friday. So it was a bonus Let's Play this week. And so it kind of gives those like opening cinematic things. I do a couple races in there. I drive around a lot, and then I somehow perfectly timed the ending of the Let's Play. Like I basically finished a race and it left me like on a runway of an airport or something like that. And so I'm like driving off as I'm doing the outro or whatever, and I see like like as I'm kind of looking at the camera, I see out of the corner of my eye like a ramp, and I'm like, oh, if I slowed down my outro a little bit, I'm basically gonna finish just as I hit this ramp and go flying off into the air. And so it is easily the coolest outro I give across any of those Let's Plays. So go check that out as well. Yeah. Over on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. You follow all of us over at thatnerdysite.com, or check out all of us at That Nerdy Site, or check out thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And as always, thank you for listening. Stay nerdy and be good to each other.